Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about another Ali Hazelwood book. We're diving in. So despite the fact that I gave an Ali Hazelwood book 1 star last year, that honestly still feels too generous for that book. It seems I can't quit you, Ali. Deep End is a spicy romance book between 2 college athletes. One is a diver and one is a swimmer. This book was previously called Wet, or maybe is still called Wet. I'm not really sure. I was confused because I'm like, oh, is there another one called Wet? It's the same book. I don't know what happened there. All I know is I read Deep End. I almost said Depot. What? Deep End on Libro FM. So this diver and this swimmer in this book are into the rougher side of things. That's right, Deep End is Ali Hazelwood's first foray into power play, and a set of 4 letters that I cannot say this early in the video without YouTube getting upsetty spaghetti with me. While Miss Hazelwood is doing something new here, in that this is getting more into the rhymes with sink category, and her other works did not get into the rhymes with sink category, unless you want to talk about the nodding from Bride, in which case I don't think that is rhymes with sink. I don't know. Another thing new here is that this book is doing a lot of discussion about therapy, which I actually thought was very well done. But it does do the same things that we can rely upon Miss Hazelwood to do. Have the man be bigly huge and the woman be small. And this has its more than usual share of cringy jokes, including this one about 50 Shades that came up more than once. The cringe jokes are something that I've learned I can rely on Hazelwood books for. You know what's also proven to be super reliable? My wallet from Ridge, who's the sponsor of today's video. Some of their wallets can take a bullet. I am not being hyperbolic. I've been a loyal Ridge customer for about 2 years now. Ridge has improved my life with their wallets and their key cases and their luggage. This is my wallet and it just literally magnetically attaches to my cell phone. I love it. But Ridge is such a lovely company. They, back in December for Christmas, sent me this wonderful Christmas box that included this customized wallet that is so precious to me. Their wallets are slim, customizable, made with premium materials, including RFID blocking materials to keep your personal information safe and secure. Ridge wallets easily fit into your front pockets, can hold up to 12 cards, and still have room for cash with a cash strap or a money clip. I have turned my whole family into Ridge wallet carriers. I use the cash strap, so does my mother, but my husband and my brother both use the money clip now. That's what's so great, is that they're so customizable. I've also recently converted my aunt and uncle, which is great because I found out that my uncle had been for years now using a literal rubber band from an asparagus as his wallet. And when my brother told me that, I said, well, I can just get a Ridge wallet for him too then, I think. But it's not just wallets. Ridge makes these handy key cases that easily fit into your pocket to help ensure your keys are always on you without stabbing you in the leg. They make wallets and key cases and luggage. Carlos and I love our luggage from them. We have traveled everywhere with our Ridge luggage for the past year. Carlos is actually out of state right now with the blue one. And I have this such cute purple one. Oh my God. It's about time to update your everyday gear to something that's built for everyday life. Ridge is running their 12th anniversary sale right now with up to 40% off their best products, and they're backed by a lifetime warranty. Go to ridge.com/readswithrachel for up to 40% off during their 12th anniversary sale. And thank you so much to Ridge for sponsoring today's video. So we're just gonna speed run through the beginning of this book up to chapter 15 because you don't really need to know like beat for beat what happens until after that, I think. Our main character, Scarlett, is in college. She's a diver. She has dreams to eventually become a doctor. She is currently in therapy. She is currently taking German classes. She wants to be a physician because her stepmom is a orthopedics surgeon. Her mom, her biological mom, died when she was 2, and her stepmom ended up getting custody of her, and she loves her stepmom. You learn eventually that her dad was abusive, so the only family that she really has is her stepmom and her dog, Pipsqueak. She had a former boyfriend, I believe his name was Josh, and he was not into, I'm just gonna have to censor myself, aren't I? Because if not, then I'm gonna get in trouble with YouTube. Do we go euphemisms or do we go bleeping? Her former boyfriend, Josh, was not into schmink. Wink, wink. She is on the diving team and she is friends with a girl named Penelope. She also has a roommate who randomly pops up, but we don't really see on page. A lot of this is like thrown by the wayside, including the stepmom. Honestly, I felt like the stepmom really could have used more page time. Her friend Penelope is dating this guy named Lucas.
I'm dating a swimmer from the Sunnydale swim team.
Has been dating this guy named Lucas since she was young. Penelope starts complaining that her and Lucas are in the first chapter. In chapter 1, it is Scarlett's birthday party, and the first thing that we learn is that Penelope and Lucas are not schmexually compatible. We learn pretty quickly that our main character Scarlett is in therapy because she has a block. She can't seem to do a dive that she really needs to do because she had a prior injury. She got physical therapy for it. She's okay now, but she cannot do the dive. She has a lot on her plate. Makes sense for a college student who wants to be a doctor, who grew up with an abusive dad, and is in therapy for this sports stuff. So her friend Penelope starts talking regularly about how her and Lucas are not schmexually compatible. Penn says, I love him, but I want other things. I want to have fun and sleep with other people and go to a party. She says, okay, will you be jealous if he slept with other people? Penelope says, not really, but I think we'll find our way back to each other in the future. We're meant to be. Now, part of the reason why I felt like this book got a little wonky, especially towards the end, is because that sort of got thrown away, that line, and wasn't really dealt with. Scarlett catches Lucas, Penn's boyfriend, staring at her at a party. Penelope says they've broken up. Her and Lucas have broken up. Then Penelope introduces Scarlett and Lucas because Penn and Lucas are still on good terms. You've never formally met my ex-boyfriend. And Lucas is like, actually, she has. So the three of them are in a conversation, and Penelope says, you two should just have schmex. And up to this point, Penelope has found out that Scarlett is into schmink just like Lucas is into schmink. She didn't want to do schmink with Lucas, so they've been just having like regular, non-schmink schmex. Ugh, I hate censoring. She's like, we're not compatible. Her and Scarlett had a conversation where Scarlett's like, oh, I'm into schmink. And Penn says, ooh, how very 50 Shades. And I'm like, did we need to bring that up? I don't think we did. I think we could have been funny without making that joke right there. Unfortunately, it gets brought up twice. I just don't want to bring up 50 Shades. Let E.L. James fade into obscurity, for the love of God. So Penn, knowing that both of them are into the same thing and knowing that she has just broken up with Lucas to go live her life, even though she thinks that they'll get back together, or meant to be, she said, I had to tell Vandy about the stuff you're into. I'm sorry, but Vandy is into the same stuff as you. Lucas turns and stares at our main character, Scarlett, and he's like, Penn, let's get out of here. This is awkward. And Scarlett is feeling super embarrassed. And Penn says, Luke, she is it. She's the sandwich. And she meant the sub. The next day, Penn apologizes and admits in the text that it was basically sexual harassment, which it was.
I made a comment earlier tonight that I guess went out over the air that I am deeply ashamed of.
Scarlett thinks to herself that with her past, she can't help but distrust men. So when she gets locked out of the swim area at, the pool, she calls Penn for help, and Penn, who is sleeping with someone else, Penn's like, I'll just have Lucas come by, no big deal. But it's a big deal to our girl, Scarlett, who can't help but distrust men. I do feel like the distrusting men kind of came and went, sort of fair weather thing. So Lucas shows up to the pool to help her out, and it is awkward. And instead of just being normal, he says to her, want to get it out of the way? The elephant in the room? The one with the giant ball gag in its mouth? She says, maybe the elephant's just blindfolded. Him, and tied up. Her, and doing as it's told. Him, what a good elephant. Her, I'm glad we got over the awkwardness of never having a conversation, but knowing the schminky schmeck stuff each other's into. Him, I don't know what you're into. And she says, it almost feels like a yet is being withheld. He knows quite a bit about her, despite her knowing absolutely nothing about him, which I don't mind at all as long as it's not a stalker, which it's not. That works for me. He says, why do you keep massaging your shoulder? I thought your surgeries went well. And he says, come closer. And she says, why? And he says, because I just asked you to.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
And I'm like, oh no, something about this is working for me. I don't know why, but something about this initial conversation, I was like, oh my God, am I into him? No. Well, no. And so he gives her a little stretchy stretch to help out her back. This is not a euphemism. He literally stretches her shoulder stuff out. He says, "Why are you nervous around me? Is it because I make you uncomfortable or because you don't think I know where Penelope is?" She says, "Oh, are you okay with Penelope being with someone else? You're not jealous?" He says, "Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm not jealous at all." "Do you still have feelings for her?" "Sure, we've been through a lot." "Would you have continued on being vanilla?" I'm like, oh my God, you guys have never had a conversation before. This is going so fast. Why am I not hating it though? He's still stretching her muscle, by the way. Again, not a euphemism. "You're nervous. Is it me or men in general?" She realizes that she's wanting stuff from him. Penn's suggestion has wormed its way into her brain. Anyway, they separate, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't already hate this guy. What's happening? When I tell you that I barely ever hated this guy, and it's only because like one line kind of gave me the ick, he was perfectly fine. Now, normally, if a guy is like, typically in Ali Hazelwood books, the dudes are just okay. This dude's more than okay. I know I'm shocking you right now. I know. If we're being honest, I gave this a 4. I know. We'll talk about it later. But the point is, normally what happens is if I can stand the guy, I can't stand the girl. I don't hate Penelope either. What? Scarlet. God damn it. I don't hate Scarlet either. I hate Penelope. More, I hate the way Penelope was written. It all feels like a setup. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe the bar is so low with Ali Hazelwood books that I'm like, oh my God, I didn't hate these people? This guy isn't giving me the ick? This chemistry, I'm actually feeling it? It's making me want to like hide from him? But like in a, oh my God, you're kind of cute kind of way? Who am I? There's other school stuff going on. So she actually gets called to one of her professor's offices thinking she's going to get accused of plagiarism or something. But she actually gets asked to do a research project because she had a really good idea. It's a research project, something to do with pancreatic cells. As soon as I closed the book, I forgot all about it. And in therapy, her therapist asks if her injury is preventing her from swimming, but she's not really to dive into that topic, pun intended. And I like the way that we discuss how she's feeling, like on an emotional level. "In the pool, my body is a machine versus outside, everything is on display and everything else feels out of control." So she's at a meeting for this research project to do with pancreatic cells again, and the doctor's like, "I want to introduce you to somebody who's going to participate." And of course, who is it? It's Lucas. But of course, this is an Ali Hazelwood book, so it takes the time to be like, I look over and I have to look up and up and up because the guy is so huge. Mr. Bigley huge. The other guy, Zach, is there, and it says he looks like a boy next to Lucas, and I kind of died inside at that point because I was like, no, up to this point I wasn't really hating this. The 50 Shades jokes have got to go, but I hate when we compare every other man to the Bigley huge man and say like, look how much of a little boy, everybody looks next to him. I don't like that. So he calls the doctor that they're working with by her first name, and she's like shocked by this. So in a conversation afterwards, he says, "You really do like your authority figures, don't you?" Oh my God, what? Oh, shut up, we'll talk about it later. And she's like, "Are we really doing this?" Doing what? Openly acknowledging that we know way too much about each other's schmexual preferences every time we talk. And then they go back and forth over who's more of a perv, which I didn't love. They switch back talking about school. Turns out he is also pre-med. Oh my God, not 2 doctors. They were in the same physics class last year, which is shocking she never noticed him. He had to tell her that this was true. I mean, considering how absolutely freaking tall that we're told that this man is, how'd she possibly miss him? She asks, is it weird for us to be working together, like knowing what we know about each other and also like with, you know, Penn between us? And he's like, no. It's very clear that he is no longer interested in dating Penn. He still cares about her as a friend, but he's not interested in her. There is so much schmexual tension between these two. So he's like, let's get dinner. And no, it's not a euphemism for his eggplant. Then his friends crash dinner along with this girl who is named, jump scare, Rachel. I can't stand when my name is in books. And Rachel is friends with Penn, and she's asking where Penn is because she thinks it's weird for Scarlett and Lucas to be having dinner together. She mentions to Lucas that her ex, Josh, Scarlett's ex, Josh, was not understanding about her schmink interests. He didn't get how you can be against violent men but want men to do things to you that seem violent. Lucas says he doesn't think the two are related at all. What you and I like is about trust, he says. Whatever happened to you sounds like it had little to do with you making any decision. Her and Penn then later get dinner together, different day. And Penn says that no one else knows that her and Lucas have broken up, which I do not understand why. She says people are gonna make a big deal out of it. I don't get this. What do they get? They're all college students. Who cares if you guys broke up? It just seems like set up so that we can have this moment later where Penelope's like, oh, you betrayed me. And all their friends are like, yeah, Scarlett, you betrayed Penn. And the like how we got here doesn't make any sense. Okay, and for context, Lucas is one of the fastest swimmers in the world.
And it seems as though the millionaires are ready to play their game, so we can stop stalling with the mindless chat.
The swim team and the dive team use the same pool. He's sort of a captain. He's sort of in charge a little bit. Sort of in charge a little bit can also be applied to the spicy scenes in this book. A girl named Victoria, who's also on the dive team, gets injured. Her name is not important. The important part is now Scarlett is going to be taking her place here in a little bit. Okay, so now with the first, that was 15 chapters out of the way, we're doing our deep dive. Starting in chapter 16, our main character Scarlett is with her therapist, whose name is Sam, and she's talking to Sam about anything but the inward dive, which is the dive that caused Scarlett to become injured, which she now has a block about. So they're talking about Victoria getting injured. Sam asks, how's she now? I feel guilty filling our session with chatter of something that has nothing to do with inward dives. This is what's on my mind though. You have been severely injured. Now the same thing has happened to a friend. Does this validate your fears? Scarlett says, I don't dive in constant fear of injury. So Sam says, what are you afraid of? If your fear is not about getting hurt, then what are you afraid of? I really did like the therapy in this book. It just felt like very normalizing therapy sessions. They're working on the research paper, research project together, her and Lucas in chapter 17. There's another guy involved named Zach, but just like the research project is not really the point. I don't really know what Zach's point was. He was just sort of there. Her and Lucas, basically as soon as they found out about each other's certain specific shared interest, the heat was on, but it didn't bother me that it was it wasn't insta love. It was, oh, we're into the same thing. Why not flirt with each other? So they're sitting there working on the research project. I don't know why I winked. They are doing the research project, but also he's touching her. He has his hand around her ankle, but they're not talking about the fact that they are touching. They're talking about random stuff, which just only adds to the heat and intensity of the moment. He asks, are you a senior? She says, I'm a junior in college. If this was high schoolers, I would die and throw the book out the window. He asks about, what else she's doing. She says, I'm taking German because med school's like foreign languages. And then she's thinking, wait, I don't know about this because this was still Penn's guy for so long. It's not morally wrong. It doesn't hurt anyone. There are no victims here, but maybe it's messed up. At the very least, it's so, I don't know, heteronormative of me, gender conforming, regressive, stereotypical, banal. I hate it. I love it. She's thinking about her and his shared interest in Rhymes with Sink, and she's like, oh, this makes me feel like a bad person a little bit, but also I'm really into it. But then she sort of shuts down with him and says to him, just because Penn shared something about me that she never should have, it doesn't mean that you know me. And so she pulls away from him. In the next chapter, she keeps thinking about how her therapist asks, if you're not afraid of getting hurt again, injured again, what are you afraid of? She's still diving. She's just not doing the inward dive, which is the dive that landed her with an injury. And so at practice, come to find out Victoria, the one who got injured in chapter 16, is out because the injury is substantial.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the pool area. Go clean up your locker. You're off the team.
And her coach is like, so I want you to team up with Penn on synchronized dive. And the coach says, it's not between you and someone else. It's either you do this or Penn does not do synchronized dive with somebody at all. Now, Penn is fine. Penn is totally fine. Penn starts flirting with her teacher's assistant. So for all intents and purposes, Penn has moved on, but there was still that line at the beginning where she said, I think me and Lucas are sort of like endgame. We'll end up together eventually. We're inevitable. And what I didn't like about this was that when Scarlett and Lucas start this relationship, she's constantly worried about what Penn will think of them doing schmecks. But the problem is Penn was the one who encouraged that. Now, what the issue would be is that Penn eventually thinks that her and Lucas will be together eventually in some date out in the future, right? That's not what Scarlett thinks about. She's concerned about doing the thing that Penn told her to do. Now, when Scarlett starts to fall for Lucas, sure, that could be the part where she says, well, she said that her and Lucas eventually will get back together, so falling for him is a bad idea. But sitting there time and time again being worried about having schmecks with Lucas when Penn was the one who told you to have schmecks with Lucas is weird. And I just felt like it was a waste of time when we were harping on it, only for in the end, Penelope to turn around and be like, oh my God, everyone see what Scarlett did to me? She's been sleeping with my boyfriend. When Penn was not set up to be that character, I really did not like that. It did dampen my enjoyment. Dampen. Ha! Because pools. So she's at a party at his house, and so is, again, Jump Scare, the character named Rachel. There's also a character named Hassan, which I couldn't help but think, oh my God, are me and Hassan Piker in the same book? I have to tell Lou. And she's thinking about the memory of his hands all over her leg, but then she's also thinking about how anxious she is being in this room full of people. And it says, I write fan fiction of people's smallest facial expressions until I'm certain that they despise me, if only Googling whether someone hates me were a possibility. And I totally understand overanalyzing everybody's facial expression and then making up. I have gone into great detail about why people hate me, only to find out that that was completely a figment of my imagination. Anyway, Lucas and her in a conversation together, he says that she seems touch-starved and lonely and a little hungry too.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
You don't even know me. I don't, but no one else here does either, which proves my point. The way you're acting with me, what you did on Wednesday, is it some kind of game? He had emailed her being like, so maybe, yes? And she had ignored it. Are you trying to convince me that I made a mistake? What I want from you requires enthusiastic consent, not convincing. Not every girl is attracted to you. You are, though. Why is this working for me? You're also uncomfortable with men. I could tell when you didn't know I existed, and I could tell when you became aware of me. Why are you embarrassed about this? It's just never happened to me. I've just never been attracted to someone that everyone else in the universe seems to be attracted to. You think I care whether people are attracted to me? What would I get from that? I don't know, have sex with you if you want? He says, you know who I want to have sex with. I am shocked that an Allie Hazelwood book is not making me cringe during talk about schmecks. Ha! I saw you and you made sense to me, and the more I looked, the more I knew how hard you work, how it paid off until it didn't, how little you like chaos. You want to maintain control in every aspect of your life, and yet you are unraveling, and that was before I knew that you're kinky as shit.
He was found a little bit wanting.
You're at ease with me. I don't think you realize it, but you tend to move closer when others are around. Sometimes you look to me for reassurance, maybe, and we're alone right now, and there's no signs of distress, and at some point you chose to trust me, and you get why that gets me going so hard, right? Anyway, he puts his fingers in her mouth. And she's thinking, I would literally do anything this guy asked if he were only to ask. And then also she's like, oh, I feel so ashamed by that. He says, you have two options, say nothing and I won't ever bring up anything like this again. You and I meet at Avery, we work together on the project, whatever you want, but this conversation and the ones before it never happened. Penn never got drunk, never told me about you. I never noticed you. I never touched you. Or we're going to find a time and place to meet and we're going to negotiate. And she just stares at him in silence and then he leaves. But later on, she emails him back and says, okay, when and where? She's been waiting for him to contact her and he finally shows up, hands a piece of paper over, and it's a list of stuff that he'd be interested in doing with her. And she gets like real weird about it and he says, we're going to need to work on your tendency to let your vital organs shut down whenever something unexpected happens. Your neurons can only take so many anoxic events. She also has a list of things that she would be interested in doing with him. So they're going to compare lists and say like what they are willing to do with each other. And once again, it says very 50 Shades, Penn would say. And I am begging that we stop bringing Miss E.L. James into this. Literally begging. Any other book. I understand it's like a cultural touchstone. Let's make it not that. Let's stop. Because God, what a terrible bunch of books. And it's not even funny. Tell me when you're done filling it in. What about yours? I'm done with mine. Can I see it? Are you trying to copy my homework? It would save you the ordeal of having to admit your own wants, wouldn't it? He's absolutely right, and I'm mortified. I need to know what you need, Scarlett. We both have some baggage about when it comes to being honest about what turns us on. It takes her 2 days to go through this list because it requires what she says is a ridiculous amount of introspection, which is really fair. I've never been in the position to be fully sincere about my fantasies. I think that this is like really important, the way that this is set up, is that this is going to be really helpful for someone who is just getting into Rhymes with Sync to like see a healthy way for your first interaction with a partner in power play, like how that should work, and that it's normal because of, you know, society to deal with those feelings of shame, but just because those feelings come upon you does not mean that you have to sit with them. You just sort of say, this is a thing that I'm feeling, and let it pass you by. And also making this like very conversational, I think is good. And she thinks about the fact that she previously had asked her ex-boyfriend Josh to be rougher with her. He suggested that I bring it up in therapy and get my psychologist's take on whether it's a good idea or something edible that'll fuck you up for the next decade. Meanwhile, she's waiting for Lucas to set a date for them to talk again, and every time he cancels at the last minute. And he's also been skipping their meetings to do their research project. Meanwhile, Penn is saying things like, I think it was a good choice to break up with Lucas. So there are like things there that make you think, oh, maybe Penn changed her mind about wanting to end up with Lucas in the future. But we don't really deal with that on the page. Like, she's not thinking that. Scarlett's not thinking maybe she changed her mind. She's only thinking about, I'm gonna feel bad for Penn if I have schmex with Lucas. Lucas texts her and says, let's meet in 10 minutes for stuff. Before we start, I'd like to know something. What happened with your father? You clearly have triggers, and understanding what happened might help me steer away. She explains that over the years when she was growing up, after her mom died when she was 2, her dad remarried, and her father became increasingly abusive towards her and her stepmother. By the end, he was tracking all our movements, monitoring our interactions, isolating us from the rest of the world and from each other. I don't feel like this really comes across on page. Like, I was really surprised by this, and I didn't feel like this was something that we dealt with in the rest of the book. Feels a little bit undercooked. When I was 13, Barb picked me up from school. I began crying and begging her not to take me home, and she decided to put an end to it. She left Dad, managed to get custody, put us both in therapy. I can usually work through my triggers. I don't like raised voices, but it's not a hard limit. And I actually like being handled roughly, control, discipline, as long as it's within specific contexts. She's like, I am not into degradation kink. She starts getting really nervous. She's like, I should just pick up his list. I just need to like look at his list. And she's like, I'm feeling the same muscle freezing paralysis that I feel when I try to do an inward dive again. What if it doesn't work? What if I mess up? What if I'm not good enough? She thinks. And she's like, there's a couple things that I put asterisks next to. Anyways, so they're making out. Lucas's lips are hot. His tongue is hot. His fingers framing my face are hot. My entire body is on fire. Thank you for that. What a lovely bunch of sentences. Anyway, he tells her, well, we can't do anything else. You have to actually read my list. You cannot skip it. Says who? The rules. Who made the rules? He's like, me, and I think you're okay with that. You need to read my list because the only way we can do this in a healthy way and sane way is if we both know what to expect. And he's like, by the way, sorry for bailing so much. 18 people were cut from the team this week. You can take your time, but you do have to read through the list before we get started. And the other thing is that we're not going to do a safe word. The safe word is stop. If you say stop, I stop. There's going to be some trial and error, but I need you to understand that it doesn't matter how or when you say stop, I stop. Do you want another safe word? She says no. And then he says to her, I've read your list and there's not a single thing you want that I don't want more. And then she says, what about Penn? Will she mind? He says, you do have a terrible memory. Penn and I are no longer together. I know, but she's my friend. I need to be sure that she's okay with this. I need to remind her. I need her to know that I'm not trying to, that this is just going to be schmex. I'm not trying to start a serious relationship with my friend's ex. And he says, I'll take care of it. And I'm like, I don't understand. This was Penn's idea. And then we harp on this for like the majority of the book. And then in the next chapter, she talks to Penn about this. And Penn says, I told you so. I told you so. Who told you so? Me. Moi. Penelope fucking Diana fucking Ross. Her middle name is Diana. Her last name is Ross. Ladies and gentlemen and non-binary folks, that's who. Did Lucas tell you? Yep, he called me early this morning, said you got your drunken wish, Penelope, and guess how I replied? I told you so. I was the one who initiated our breakup, and I've been worrying about him. He's not exactly passionate. It can be hard for someone as cold as he is. And Scarlett's like, I didn't see him as dispassionate dispassionate, but it doesn't matter. I don't have the emotional bandwidth to catch feelings for this guy. When Lucas and I finally started having schmecks, Penelope says, we were young and had no idea what we were doing. There was a learning curve, you know? She says, but with Theo, this teacher's assistant that she's now having schmecks with, it's different. She's like, I think with Lucas, it feels right to him to have this monolith of forbidding energy, but Theo is so much softer. So there is no reason at this point that Scarlett should still be thinking about feeling guilty for having schmecks with Lucas. We've dealt with it. We're all done. But unfortunately we do. She is thinking about in the next chapter how she's not understanding like how to reconcile Penelope's version of Lucas, the cold, dispassionate guy, with who she knows Lucas to be. She goes to his house and he tells her a little bit about his family. He's the youngest of several brothers. Did you read the list? And she says yes, and he calls her a good girl. Normally this would kind of give me the ick. Here, I don't mind it. And she thinks about the fact that she's like into this, you know, this power play stuff, and still she's dealing with a lot of shame from it. The simple pleasure of pleasing someone. Maybe I'm fucked up, a victim of the sexist power structures that society has imposed on me. She tells him, I just want to be told what to do for once. Will you do what I ask then? Can I trust you to say stop if you want me to stop? She says yes. It says, my body is a vague haze of arousal, longing of hot liquid eagerness. Taking a sip of coffee after reading that line felt weird. There's a lot of dairy in this eagerness. So since she said yes, he says, in that case, I want you to get down on your knees and go down on me. Wait, get on your knees and go down on me. Thankfully, it didn't use the word down twice in that sentence. Other books certainly would. It says he smells like soap and shower and skin. And I'm like, he smells like skin? So she goes down on him. She's thinking about the fact that this works for her, like power play works for her because this is the one thing in my life that's not about me. He's still checking in with her, still okay with this. The truth is, I don't want him to check in on me. I want to be free. And he says, oh God, I don't want to read this out loud. Okay, you just want to be told exactly what to do, don't you? Right now, you just want to be a mouth, huh? We can make that happen, Scarlett. When he looks down on me, I think of Nordic deities and sky-sent mandates. Open up. I'm going to teach you the way I like it. You want to learn, don't you? And she's like, thinking, it's my purpose in life. It won't be an hour from now, and I had no clue I cared 20 minutes ago, but now I want nothing as intensely as this. And it's a typical like, eyes up here, Scarlett, you're doing so well. You love this, don't you? You look fantastic with my in your mouth. He's too big to do anything graphic with, but he's willing to try. He finishes and he notices that she's not dry. I'm trying not to get demonetized. You did so well. You deserve to I would love to make you I would pay a not insignificant amount of money to go down on you, that you could probably just from this. The problem is, I'm not sure you want it enough yet. And I'm like, oh my God, what a monster. So he just cuts it off there and says, we have a project to work on.
Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs are being dissected more than a laboratory frog.
In the next chapter, she's thinking about the dynamic between them. Like the thing that she's into is that it's pockets of time in which power is exchanged. They have a beginning and an end. They can be broken with safe words. They can be structured and formalized as much as their participants like. Of it, she says that she likes the quiet, the grind stops, knowing that for a brief moment someone else has me, no decisions, no responsibilities. So instead they go to talking about diving, and he's like, I don't know much about diving. She's like, maybe if you had known more about diving, then Penelope wouldn't have dumped me. I could memorize every line in the diving book by degree of difficulty and it would change nothing. It's a bit of a red flaggy deadbeat boyfriend move, not knowing the basics of your girlfriend's sport. And he says, sufficiently supporting each other was the one issue we did not have, Scarlett. He's like, so what about your ex? And she says, well, he broke up with me. Lucas's forehead curls into a scowl. His forehead curls? How do you curl a forehead? I'm trying to picture what I'm supposed to be picturing here. His forehead curls. His forehead does what I do at the gym. Curl. What's that face? The scowl remains. Nothing. It wasn't like a sex thing. I never assumed it was. It was my personality. Overachiever, obsessive, with wanting things to go my way, hyper-controlled, distant. And he's like, well, you seem pretty soft. She says, I'm not soft. And he says, you are with me. Aha! Josh met someone he liked better, but he wasn't really like us. We weren't well matched in that sense. And he says, so there hasn't been anyone else? She says, no. And he says, she asks him, have you been with anyone else besides Penn? And he says, it's complicated. You find out an answer to this later and you're like, oh, cool. I will say that I do appreciate that even though she's like obsessive about certain things like going her way, or at least she says she is, I don't feel like that really comes across on page as much as I would like it to. She is, she and her roommate are terrible at cleaning. And I'm like, oh my God, same. If you saw the state of my house, it is just, there's like stuff everywhere and I never organize anything. I never fold my laundry. It just lives, there's a laundry basket right here. It just lives in basket. Like I have a carpet cleaner and I really love to carpet clean the floors because I like a clean floor, but everything else I don't organize. Everything's just sort of wherever all the fucking time. It's like, I feel like very like particular about doing things my way. But the house is not something I'm obsessive over. Whereas my sister is obsessed with cleaning and she is like, her house is meticulous. I think that that's really interesting. And I appreciated that because I'm like, this is not like OCD rep. That's not what I'm saying, but like obsessive about details, like wanting to be in control of them is something that I do with certain things. Specifically my work is a way that comes out, but my house and cleaning it is not a way that comes out. So I appreciated that the main character is like that too. Anyway, she goes to Lucas's again and he picks her up with no difficulty, like I'm a doll, a pet. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Ugh. And then they're in his room. He's there on his knees next to his low bed staring at what he uncovered. My bare He's not much for preambles. And then it says he puts firm pressure against her sticky slit. Ugh, I don't like that verbiage. Do you want to know a secret? I dreamt about you. If you want me to stop, what do you do? I say stop. You are even weirder than in the lab. Is it because I didn't let you because I'm in charge? I'm making this so unsexy by reading this in my voice. You want to be ordered around by someone you trust. Is that it? You want rules to be told what's good for you. It's so patronizing. And I nod like my life depends on it. He says, you're going to have to be quiet. Can you be quiet? Because they're in a house with a bunch of roommates. It takes him less than 10 seconds to make me. And then it says that he's eating at her like she's made of air and water. That visual is so wildly unsexy. I can't even begin to tell you the ways that gives me the ick. But it does say that her bouncy mind, which is a weird way to write that, and racing anxieties sit still, which is great. That's what she likes about power play, is that it finally gets her to turn her brain off. But then it says, I watch him watch my clenching hole on display for him. And I'm like, did we have to say clenching hole? He says, you were made for this, weren't you? I could live here in the quiet of this moment forever. They decide not to have penetrated P and V schmecks because they have not done STD testing yet. And he doesn't want to bone with a condom on, so he's just gonna wait. So they're just basically like bumping uglies without doing anything penetrative. And he says, it's like I made you up in my head, Scarlett. She's not being quiet. Apparently she's not capable. And he says, next time I'm gonna f you properly. What am I gonna do next time? Come on, Scarlett, say it. And she says, you're going to f me properly. And he says, it's a promise, Scarlett. And I'm like, oh my God, did we have to say that? So she leaves after he falls asleep. She texts him when she gets home and she's like, I wonder what his reply will look like tomorrow morning. As it turns out, I shouldn't have bothered. I thought this meant that he was gonna show up. He just doesn't talk to her. I was really mad about this. It makes sense after, but I was about to be like, this guy. In therapy, she's talking and she's like, maybe what I need to get over my block is just to be put on the spot. Like I have to do the dive and my brain will bypass the fear. And her therapist says, fear of what? You still have not answered the question. She texts Lucas and says, let me know if you want to meet this weekend. And he says, I will.
I don't understand. You're not returning my calls.
And that's it. She's like, okay, well, if it's done and he doesn't want to do this anymore, it's not gonna, it's not gonna kill her, which is great. She says, it was the best schmecks of my life and it did what I hoped it would. It gathered my scattered thoughts. It stilled me. It quieted my mind for a few hours. She is in the swimming, diving area and a bunch of dudes show up and they're not doing anything wrong. It's just that so many of them are there at once and it's just her. And she, even though she knows these guys, she's like feeling overwhelmed because it's too many men and she's, alone. And so Lucas shows up and he sort of like yoinks her out of there because he knows that she has like trauma and he's recognizing the signs and he's like, let's skedaddle. And she says to him, so we had schmecks or whatever, and you didn't call me back. I'm trying to take my cues from you, and I think you want to pretend it never happened, yeah? Is that an inaccurate read of what happened to us? And he says, no, it's not. She says, so is there a good reason you didn't contact me? And he says, no. There's not a good reason. And then who strolls in but Lucas's brother, here to save the day and offer an explanation. So they all hang out and they go out for food together, and of course the brother is just like enamored with Scarlett. And he tells her about Lucas growing up and says, oh yeah, whenever he wants something, the more he wants it, the less he'll let himself have it. It's his way of feeling in control. Like one time when he was a kid, he got a new bed and then he had to prove to himself that he didn't need it. So he made himself sleep on the floor for a really long time. And Lucas gets mad at his brother and they argue in Swedish. So when they leave, Scarlett's like, how long were you going to deny yourself? And he says 15 days. He was going to not talk to her and not try to sleep with her for 15 days. That first day, the Sunday, I almost called you a dozen times. And she's like, I am not a bed that you just decide to like not sleep on. He says, sometimes I can't breathe when you're around. And this was when I started to think, oh, she's not picking up on that he's not just like really excited that somebody shares his proclivities. He's into her and she's not picking up on that. And in this book, that makes sense. In a lot of other Hazelwood books, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, this works. Like this guy, it kind of works. I understand why he did that. It was a shitty thing to do, but I understand it. She says to him, even if it's just schmecks, it's not a good idea for me to be with someone who resents wanting me. And so she leaves. And in the next chapter, she's talking to Penelope, his ex, and she's like, you know how Lucas like tries to prove to himself that he's above wanting things? And Penelope is like, what are you talking about? And she's realizing that Penelope's version of Lucas is different than hers. Meanwhile, her and Penelope are, doing dive practice, and she is still dealing with this block. She cannot do the inward dive. She is at a party and he shows up, but she's flirting with somebody else. He grabs the guy's wrist and the guy's like, what do you care? Are you two dating? And he says, she's my sister. And I'm like, why would you say that? Why would you say that that's your sister?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So they go off to talk to each other and she's like, it was just it's fine. He says, no, I owe you respect. I owe you care. I owe you the truth. And you, on the other hand, do not owe me forgiveness. I think this is very healthy. He tells her these are the things that you should demand. They check out their healthcare portals to, they got tested and they check out the results and they're good to go. And she's like, yeah, I want to keep doing this. I want it to be like last time. My mind is wiped. But before they, get to it, he says, so after, don't leave without saying anything. And I'm like, bitch, this man is gone for you. Oh no, you're done. But she's not picking up on that. And you know what? It still makes sense. And then he says things like, your are spectacular. Has anyone told you? No, I don't just walk around getting compliments on my actually, is what I would say. And he says, what about your idiot ex?
Are you mad about Josh?
So him shitting on her ex feels so weird and I don't like it. Like just because Josh was like a little bit douchey about her interests because he was like younger and pretty immature does not mean that Lucas has a reason to be angry at the guy. Later information comes out that Josh is a douchebag, but at this point there's really no reason for Lucas to be this about it, especially when Scarlett's not that way about Penelope. Instead he says, he had a treasure, I despise him, I should be grateful though. If he wasn't a world-class I wouldn't be able to do this. She says, I'm a mess of quivers and aftershocks. And I'm like, I don't understand why we write schmeck scenes with things like that. The whole Rebecca Yarros, we're a tangle of tongues and teeth. I'm a mess of quivers and aftershocks. Anyway, so they're, doing stuff. You can take some more, my good girl. They're about to have, P&V stuff. And he says, I should stretch you out with my fingers before. He says, she's so obedient. Asks if it's too much and then says, that's too bad. You take what I fucking give you. Now, this is fine in context because she has agreed to this. And the whole thing is, if she says stop, she has every opportunity to say it and he will immediately pull back. His roommates come home while he's, quote, having the best of my life. And he says, we're going to have to train you to a bit more silently. I'm going to you for real now, okay? All the way. And I'm like, what were we doing before?
When a guy's banging you, you spin off of him because if you can feel their body,
Come on.
Afterwards, she asks him, am I doing this right? Like this whole thing? Because again, this is her first foray into this kind of relationship, this, you know, power play, schmexual relationship. And he says, you are exactly what I wanted. And I'm like, oh, she only heard the subtext in that. Like, he's so gone. They're like, we didn't know it could be like this. She says, you don't have to hold back for like the other stuff on the list. And he says, does it feel like I'm holding back? Am I taking it too easy on you, Scarlett? Am I being too nice? And then they're doing stuff again. She says, please. And he says, please what? I don't want to say it out loud. F you and your sore little oh no. Then it says that her walls down there, which I hate using the word walls, start fluttering. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if I'm just built different, but I don't think I feel fluttering. How would you even like, do you mean tensing? I don't know. You'll take what you're given and thank me for it. I'm gonna you whenever and however I want. You can be patient, right? You can be good. I'm gonna do it all to you, the stuff on the list, all of it. And then when I'm done, I'll do it again. And if you don't ask me to stop, I'll do it again. So after they're done, he's like, all right, let's go get some breakfast. And she's like, well, shouldn't I shower? And he says, if I want you showered after we I'll do it myself. And I'm like, Jesus, talk about not having to worry about anything or like make plans for yourself. Sometimes I kind of wish another adult would come in and order me around. Not in like a schmexual way, but like, I wish somebody would, like when Carlos and I had to evacuate, I wish somebody else was the adult in that situation. She's still dealing with like a lot of trauma and feeling like she's not good enough because of what happened with her dad and the dive that went very wrong and landed her with an injury. Maybe this is what I need, to be harsher with myself, punish my body and brain for the things it cannot accomplish, train the weakness and the failure out of, nope, I'm not thinking about that right now. So they have like bagels on top of his car, like out somewhere, which is super cute, specifically because bagels are my favorite food. The way to my heart is a lox bagel with cream cheese and capers and a little lemon. Oh my God, I want to abandon working right now and go get one. So they're like talking, flirting, learning more about each other. He's teaching her a little bit about like Swedish stuff. But then Penelope calls because her car broke down and they were about to, you know, make plans to go on a hike together. And now he's like helping out Penelope. And she's like, why am I even organizing cutesy excursions with Lucas? Like, this is not what we had intended to do. And this is the moment where it should have been like, Penelope said that eventually they would be together. Of course, it makes sense that she's going to call the guy who's eventually going to be her husband, probably, I don't know, in order to help her out with husband type things. In the next chapter, she feels like she's also failing at therapy. And she overhears a bunch of the coaches talking about her mental block and her failure to do the dive. She's seeing a professional? The second in 6 months, no progress. I feel like I'm a malfunctioning waffle maker that should be harvested for parts and landfilled. Most of all, I hate myself. And she also thinks like, I don't like that Lucas dropped me to go help her. She's like, wait, for all I know, the two of them are still boinking. I'm a mess, I'm a failure, a ball of anxiety, all twisted. But then Lucas calls her the Swedish word for cozy. And she's like, but I'm also cozy. At least one person in the universe seems to think so. They have another conversation in the next chapter after she doesn't win a competition. And she's like, oh, is this the part where you like offer to pity me after every competition I don't win? I'm not doing great. I'm not sure I'm in the mood for being manhandled. And then she switches her mood and is like, do you want to have it might take my mind off things. He says, yeah, it would. I'd make sure of it. The problem is I'm not convinced that your mind shouldn't be on things. Do you have a mental block? Is it all dives or just the one that you had mentioned earlier, the inward dive? She says, I don't want to talk about it. And he says to her, I'm sorry, Scarlett, as in like for all that she's dealing with. And she says, being sorry is simply not something that I ever allowed myself. It just never occurred to me. And then she starts sobbing. He like holds her while she cries. She says, you know, I actually used to be a good diver. There's no reason for me to be so hung up on the injury. I had surgery. I was so lucky. And she explains like the problem was that day had so much compounding stuff that I'm kind of traumatized by it. It was her NCAA final and she failed her first dive and got injured. But the problem was also that the night before her father had called her and by court order, he's not supposed to do that. And she tried to call her stepmom to figure out what to do, but she had patient emergencies, so she couldn't get help from her stepmom. And on the same day, Josh, her boyfriend of 3 years, broke up with her because he fell in love with somebody else.
Are you mad about Josh?
Within 24 hours, you got dumped by your boyfriend and contacted by your abusive father. Why are you so reluctant to talk about that day? He tells her about his experience where his mom had died when he was 14, and the only person who understood him at the time was Penelope, this American girl that he, was near. They were doing swim stuff together, and he had to learn the tools to communicate to his trainer and to his family that he needed to stop swimming for a while after that. So after talking about this, she goes to try to do the inward dive, and she can finally do it again. And she just did it at a pool where he was. They're just like, what if I just try it? There's nothing hanging on this. Nobody else is watching. Let me just try it. And if I don't fail at it, then at least I got it done. But if I fail at it, then nothing happens because nothing hangs on this. In the next chapter, which is chapter 42, he finally explains like what his tattoo is, which on the cover looks like kind of bonkers. I traced the spruces and oaks and pines, blackbirds and sparrows, snowy patches and rocks. What is this? He says, my hometown. She says, I thought you were from Stockholm. He says he's from Skellefteå. He says, say it sounds like a piece of IKEA furniture not even the Swedish king would be able to assemble, and I will throw you back into the pool. Aw, cute. She also got her, what is it called when you take the medical, when you want to go to med school? The exam is at the MCAT. She's like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Like right now is when my MCAT score is supposed to be in my email. And she gets it and her MCAT score is good. Nothing but good news for Scarlett, of course. And she's like, how did you know that it would be good? Did you hack my email? And he's like, no, I just know you. And he says like all these nice things about her. And then she asks him, are you and Penelope still having schmecks? I know it's not my business, but when she called you last week, I just thought, and like Penn is sleeping with other people and you and I are not using condoms. So, and he says, I have no interest in having schmecks with anyone but you. I haven't in a while. And I'm like, bruh, he's so down bad for you. And he's like, I'm not sure that you get it, Scarlett. And he's hinting that he likes her. Actually, I know you don't. I'm starting to suspect that you don't understand a single fucking thing, Scarlett. You asked if I was just pity you, and I let it go because while you may think I'm mean, I'm actually nice, Scarlett, and you weren't doing great. But does this feel like a pity to you? And I'm like, oh my God, we're doing it again. He says, look at you, you're soaked. I fucking love it. What do you do if you want me to stop? She says, I say stop. And he says, good girl, should I stop? Do you think she says yes? She doesn't. He said, oh God, I hate reading this out loud. I don't you because I pity you. Why do I you, Scarlett? She's like, I don't know. We're in the middle of doing stuff. I can't think thoughts.
I'm trying to make second half adjustments. I'm multitasking here.
You want to be roughed up, don't you? Why do I you, Scarlett? I'm gonna hurt you once more. I think he was spanking her at this point. Once more, and then I'm gonna get inside you. And he says, I you because it's all I want to do from the moment I wake up. I you because you're the most perfect thing I've ever felt, Scarlett. And I'm like, if that doesn't start to make her think that he's into her, I don't know what will. In dive practice, diving practice, at the pool stuff, she tries to do the dive again and, she's in front of everybody and she misses it. But she didn't expect to fail, so it kind of stings. Not a single glance slides in my direction, and in all honesty, why would it? Congrats on your 1,000 missed dive, Vandy. That's her last name. Here's a cake made of Swiss chard and anchovies. That's actually funny. I suspect that their expectations of me have been permanently downsized. So in therapy, she finally starts to open up. She tells her therapist, Sam, about what happened during that NCAA dive where she got injured, but also her father had called her and that's not supposed to happen, and her stepmom didn't answer, and her boyfriend broke up with her, and then she got injured. I realize now that it's all connected, and the more I think about it, do you remember when you asked what I was afraid of? It's not to be injured again. I'm afraid of the unpredictability of existing. I'm afraid of not being able to control the direction of my life. I'm afraid that no matter how much I plan, I won't be able to avoid hurtful and sad things. Mostly I'm afraid of attempting something and not being perfect at it. And she realizes that Sam, her therapist, knew this all along. She just needed Scarlett to say it. And then after this, after talking through this, she dives again and she manages two terrible, but manages to do them nonetheless, 2 terrible inward pikes. Is this all a little, I don't know, too perfect where it's like I finally opened up to my therapist and now I can do a thing again? A little, but I still think it's good. It still works. There's a joke about quiverful families in here that I thought was kind of funny. Certainly better than the 50 Shades joke. He's traveling, I don't know where, for swim competition. And she's like, I feel like I we've become like friends. And his list covered things like and pony play, but offered no insight on whether or not I should contact him if I just miss him. And I don't want to overstep and ruin our like arrangement that we have going on. And I don't know what Lucas would want me to do. She's talking to Penelope and she's like, I can't believe that Lucas applied for med school during an Olympic year because he's going to end up going to the Olympics. And Penelope says, yeah, it's kind of pointless, honestly. Even if he gets accepted, he's going to defer. He might as well have waited, but hey, he loves to torture himself. He physically can't go to med school and still pursue swimming at the elite level. So in front of other people, this person's name is Bree, someone asks Penn, do you miss Lucas? And she said, oh, you know, we text and we were long distance for so long. And in front of other people, she turns to Scarlett and says, what about you, Vandy? Do you miss Lucas? And another girl asks, why would Vandy miss him? And Penn says, it's just a joke, no reason. Now, this honestly does not make sense because later, in front of everybody, Penelope is going to like Judas the shit out of this and say, oh, look what Vandy did. She's been sleeping with Lucas. And none of them are going to think back, it is weird that time before you were like, do you miss Lucas? Instead, they're just like, yeah, Vandy, that's really messed up. Anyways, they talk about this, just the two of them, and Penn's like, it was hilarious. Was it? For me anyway, you should have seen your lustful little guilty face. Or panicked, mostly panicked. Don't worry, any day now, Lucas and I will bite the bullet and tell the team that we broke up. And I'm like, why haven't you told the team that you're gonna that you have broken up? She's like, well, they're gonna make such a big deal out of it. Why? They are adults. What do they care? It doesn't affect them at all. I did not understand this. And meanwhile, she's hanging out with her teacher's assistant. She's going to his house for Thanksgiving. We have a lot in common. It's a change of pace because of our shared interests. And the Schmex is amazing. And he's so easy to talk to and very affectionate and really into me. You know, Luke was, it's a personality thing. His range of emotions is kind of narrow. And Scarlett's like, are we thinking of the same person? Because I don't feel like Lucas is like that at all. Anyway, back in like competitions, she's finally doing inwards again and she gets a 7.5.
Terplakis! Bingo time!
And in this competition, I forget where they are, this other girl, Carissa, shows up and says to Scarlett, you need to watch your back with Penelope Ross. What do you mean? Plainly, she's a backstabbing bitch. Back in Jersey, I dove in the same club as her, and she was universally despised. And Scarlett's like, Penn is my friend. Nothing in her behavior has ever suggested what you're saying. And they're like, okay, just watch your back. I don't really understand what happened with this because like Penn does do a shitty thing later, but then also says that this girl is a liar. I don't know who was lying in that situation, but like also Penelope cannot in fact be trusted. It turned out that they did used to dive together, and Carissa, I think that was her name, her mom was the director of the diving club, but she was being verbally abusive, so Penelope reported her, and she was suspended, but Carissa remained in the club and thought Penn had ruined her mother's career and maybe even her life. And she's like, all I had at the time was Lucas because everybody was so mean to me. But then it gets really weird because Lucas calls and he's like, hey, what's going on with you two? And Scarlett says, oh, it's, stuff with Carissa. And Penelope says, nothing. So I guess Penelope was the one lying, but we never really hear that. So Scarlett snaps at Carissa and says, you need to stop being rude to Penn. And Carissa's like, I'm doing you a favor. Scarlett says, no, you're just harassing us. And Carissa says, I hope you get to reap the consequences of your stupidity. I don't know. Penelope being villainized was just kind of done in a way that I felt was undercooked and kind of lazy. I still did give this a 4-star, okay? So I'm still being nice. I'm just saying that I think that this could have been a lot better if we had done things a lot differently with Penelope. And also not done the 50 Shades joke, which was also Penelope. So Penelope's the problem here. So now that her mental block is all done, she is able to dive again. She is going to be representing her country at Worlds. He shows up. He's back from traveling, doing his swimming stuff. They've been without each other for about a month now. They're getting spicy and she tries to grab his eggplant.
I'm thinking, where's my sausage? Where's my sausage?
Chicago, you gotta have sausage.
Yeah,
right?
you didn't even order sausage on this? Oh.
I have sausage.
And it says he pushes her hand away. He takes his eggplant out, shoves my shorts to the side, finds me bare and wet. I cannot believe I managed to do without him for over a month. I squirm against his touch. He slaps her wrist away again and says, I think you forgot who's in charge. And then he starts talking about how beautiful she is. He's like, have I ever told you? Have I? Have I ever told you you're beautiful? Have I? Have I? Have I? He's like, I've been watching you dive the past few days, which means he has been watching her on TV diving. And I'm like, bitch, he's so into you. I swear, Scarlett, I think about all the ways I've to you all the time or play them in my head so much I'm afraid they'll wear off. We both like avalanches in less than a minute. Like avalanches, huh? Fascinating. He's like, I've always respected divers, but I never found real pleasure in watching them until you. It feels wrong and forbidden. The obvious question, what about Penn, lingers between us unasked. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense unless you start to feel like you're both having feelings for each other, in which case you need to ask him, what about the long-term plan with you and Penn, not about the fact that his eyes are dark in the dim kitchen light and this feels wrong and forbidden. Like, you need to spell out that it's about the fact that Penn wanted long-term Lucas to be her husband and right now wants to do whatever and go off with her life. But the way that we frame this is so wonky and weird. Penelope starts texting Luke saying, hey, where are you? Come out, we're having fun. He says, hey, by the way, I got my first acceptances into med school. She's like, we have to go to Amsterdam soon. I would love to see it with you. And he's like, I'd love to see it with you too. And I'm like, he loves you. He's obsessed with you. I'm surprised he hasn't proposed yet mid-boink, but I can understand why she doesn't see it. In the middle of their research project that they're working on, they hop on over and start fooling around. He spends a graphic amount of time with his head between my legs, and then he doesn't let her finish and makes her go work on her research project having not finished. I could sneak into the next door bathroom and make myself. You could, but you won't. You have no idea what I'm gonna do. You'll do what I say and we both know it. But then he says, you're f***ing adorable, Scarlett. It makes me want to wreck you. I don't like that sentence, but I don't know. Maybe there's like rhymes with sync context there that I just don't understand. I don't really understand what he means by that, and like the implication I'm getting from it is not cool, but I think I'm just understanding it wrong. Anyways, after they finish working on the research project for the day, he takes her into a room and he says, I don't know why it's such a turn on that you're smarter than me, but every time we have a project meeting, I go home and jerk off until my is raw. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like a medical emergency.
Oh, I have sausage.
So he finally lets her finish. Congrats, yay. She says, I want to reciprocate. And he says, but that's not what I want. And so he basically just like fiddles the eggplant on her face. I knew you wouldn't mind being my precious toy, my girl, mine to use, mine to destroy and to fix. I just don't know what he means by destroy. It's all I want for him to tell me what to do and to take care of me. And he says, I can't believe you exist. And I'm like, man, pick up on these clues. Pick up on these clues. Come on. She goes home to St. Louis to be with her stepmom and her dog Pipsqueak. The whole time she's texting Lucas and she's like, I just don't really understand. Like, shouldn't we be exchanging nudes and flowery mouth accounts? He should teledom me, order me to his cyber. And yet the only parts of our bodies that travel across the Atlantic are my dimple from the day Pipsqueak, Rachel, the dog, wouldn't stop licking my cheek, and the long-fingered grip on the rod that he uses for ice fishing. What were you thinking? She sees her ex while she's home, and of course she like compares him to Lucas, and I'm like, did we need to do that? We should get together sometime. Aurora wouldn't mind, and I care about you. You didn't act like someone who cared about me. If you think our breakup was easy for me, you can't control who you fall for. She says, you can, however, decide to not break up with your girlfriend on the day of her NCAA finals. It never occurred to you that you could have acted less selfishly, and maybe you're not the nice guy that you think you are. I'm glad she had this conversation. That was important. I'm also glad that we don't have like a run-in with the dad. I don't think that that was necessary. I was afraid that like the dad was gonna be like the villain in this story, but he doesn't come up. Her stepmom asks like, are you seeing somebody? And she says, there's this like convoluted thing with this guy. Her stepmom says, it sounds like a rom-com premise, but she says, we're just having fun at the Pink Pony Club. Just kidding. She doesn't say that part. Texting with Lucas, she realizes that somebody, I can't remember who, probably thinks we're dating. We should set the record straight. And Lucas says, Or maybe we should just start dating. She freezes. She's like, no, he didn't really, no, that's... nah. And then he moves on to talking about something else and she's like, nah. And honestly, as a person who's done this before, actually with Carlos, I was like, he's not that into me. He's not that into me. He's probably talking to a bunch of other girls. I get this. This makes sense to me. Whereas in the other books, like people were like, no, it makes sense that she's not picking up on the clues. To me, it doesn't make any sense in those other books. But in this one, it makes sense. And that just goes to show how incredibly subjective reading is. And he's like, hey, I want you to come to Melbourne with me because he has to go to Australia. He also gets accepted into Stanford Medical School. And she's thinking, what if we did start dating? Would Penelope mind? Would it be against girl code? They're boinking again, and she says, I feel like an object created for him by him. Did I exist before the first time he f***ed me? I have no memory of it. Do I exist when we're not together? I'm just a toy, his favorite, irreplaceable. And then mid this, he starts talking to her about his Stanford acceptance. That's how she found out, was mid-coitus. He couldn't wait to tell me. And he's like, being apart was so hard. It was cruel, Scarlett, to know that you exist, but I can't touch you and you and be with you. You get it, right? And I think he's trying to hint at her here for the first time. You get it, right? Like, I'm into you. You get it, right? Please don't make me say it. I think he's hoping that she'll say it first because while he could say basically anything while they're boinking, if it's about like their emotional feelings for each other, he, I think, doesn't think that she can handle that and wants her to say it first, wants her to broach the subject first. So then he switches the conversation back to, you're so sensitive. You if I just moved a little. They both finish silently. Apparently he schooled her in how to do that. She says to him, sometimes I'm afraid that this is the best thing I'll ever have for the rest of my life. They're at his house and his roommate, Hassan, is like, hey, so Penn was asking after you. Scarlett's in the other room. She's not supposed to be able to hear this conversation, but she does. And Lucas is like, yeah, Penn has my number. You told me a couple months ago that you guys broke up, but last night you went upstairs with Vandy. I wasn't sure if I could tell Penn. Lucas says, you can. Penn knows about it. So Hassan says to their other roommate, Kyle, that Lucas is having a love triangle with Penn and Vandy. And Lucas says, there's no secret here. Whatever Penn asks, you can answer sincerely. And they're like, I just don't understand. I thought that, like, I didn't think that Scarlett was, like, into dating anybody. I just thought of her as kind of off limits. And Lucas says, she is off limits. And I'm like, oh! And then he, the other guy starts talking about Scarlett's of course he does. And Luke's like, consider carefully whether you want to finish that sentence. And I'm like, I don't know if I like this, because I feel like if it were the other way around and like Scarlett were listening to somebody talk about his pecs, she wouldn't act like this and it wouldn't be like sexy if she acted like this. And so they switch it over to, well, what about Penn? She's cute if you're not dating her. And Luke is like, yeah, be my guest. So this should be the moment where she's like, oh, if he doesn't care if other people date Penn, but he cares if people talk about my something is up. So she walks into the room and he just walks up and kisses her right in front of everybody. Well, everybody as in his own roommates. Everybody else outside of this still thinks that Lucas and Penn are dating. For some reason, I don't understand it either. They're at, what is it, Worlds? I don't know. I couldn't keep up with all the different competitions. I don't know anything about that stuff. And he's like, why don't you come to my room? As soon as she gets in there, she's like, I need a minute too. And he says, nah, I can tell you what you need. And I'm like, I don't hate it. But then he says, I don't like these things. You're made for this, aren't you? You're a beautiful thing made for me. Apparently she can't be quiet. Again, we've gone back to that. He tells her to bite a blanket. If Carlos is watching that, he just cringed. Anytime somebody puts fabric in their mouth, he gags. He hates that texture, and watching somebody else do it, he can't handle it. If our kids do that, if they bite like their t-shirt or something, he's like, stop, I can't handle it. So after they finish, she says to him, should we stop having sex? Doesn't it interfere with athletic performance? And he's like, no, not at all. In fact, move your stuff in here and stay in my room with me. You're 2 floors away and that's too far. And she says, why? He says, Scarlett. She's like really confused and he's like, you know why? I really don't. Okay, we're at a major competition. I won't ask you to have this conversation right now. And she's like, what conversation? And he says, but if you're ready, I can tell you why I want you here. And he's like, you're still not emotionally available. Like, you're still not ready to admit the feelings out loud. And this Makes sense. So super intimate. She has to shave his back for competition. Cute. Just kidding. This is something that I could not do. I do not want to shave another person's body hair. They had run into another guy previously and it was kind of awkward, and he was like, he was weird, the guy was weird, but like not in a bad way. I don't really know how to describe it. Anyway, the point is he finally tells her that the reason why he said it's complicated as to did he sleep with other people outside of Penelope is because him and Penelope had a relationship where they were doing threesomes with other people, and that guy was one of them. And she's like, oh, wow. For someone who'd be a-okay with me tying her up and keeping her in a closet, she's like, I'm just surprised. In the list, you said that you weren't interested in threesomes. He says, I'm not, Penn was. It was a couple of years ago when we only saw each other a handful of times a year. It was fine, but then when we were living in the same city, our life wasn't great. We tried stuff with, other people. And he's like, it was mostly Penn who chose like who we, did these projects with. She'd find someone, ask me if I agreed, come to me when the plans were made. It was fine, good even, though I'm not as attracted to men as I am to women. A bisexual king. Although she says, are you tragically straight? And he says, or thereabouts. If you're attracted to other men, you're a little bit bisexual. And she's like, wow, you're just like so rational. I don't know that I could share. And he's like, well, it's not that simple. And by the way, I actually asked for you. And she said, what? And he said, every single person Penn and I had schmex with was her choice and I was okay with it. But when you joined the team, I asked her if she could approach you. Why? And he's like, yeah, well, apparently you had a boyfriend and that was it. But Penn didn't forget. She knew I found you attractive. She teased me about it. That's what she does with people she loves. And I'm like, oh my God, you asked your girlfriend to boink this woman a while ago? You've been into her. And honestly, I think that that's adorable. During a dive, she gets injured, like bruising. I screwed up the fulcrum smacked during my lead-ups. I don't know what that means. He's like, this bruising is bad. My cheeks feel wet because my eyes are leaking. I wipe at them with my palms. Just happy to be here. That's supposed to be my motto. Where else are you hurt? She says, just that in the back of my thighs. He gets bruise relief lotion. And she's like, you don't have to do that. I have some in my room. And he says, yeah, but you don't use it because you don't feel like you deserve it. You know what you're capable of and you're angry you didn't perform accordingly. And that's a good thing within reason. And I'm like, oh my God, this man is so emotionally intelligent. And that's why this book got a higher rating than all the other Ali Hazelwood books I read. Also, this isn't miscommunication, which is something I really don't like. So they have this conversation not long after this where she says, I like you and I'm sorry that Penn broke up with you. And he says, I'm not, Scarlett. She says, sometimes I think that it would be nice if you and I ended up in med school together. We'd make a good team for study groups. She's thinking like, I'm not even talking about I'm serious. But then she thinks to herself, well, like, why not? He and I go together so well in so many ways, and would Penn even care? And I'm like, would Penn even care? Can we talk about what she said at the beginning with the whole thinking that they're going to end up together still? She's like, yes, we agreed on but things have changed, she thinks to herself. And the prospect of him disappearing from her life is like unbearable. And she's thinking to herself, oh shit, I think I might be in love with this guy. And she's like, aren't you delaying going to med school anyways? And he says, no, I'm not. I'm starting med school this fall. And she's like, oh, I guess I misunderstood. Penelope said that you were going to defer a year. And he says, no, I'm sure that that's what Penelope told you, but I don't have any intention of postponing. If it's going to be between swimming and med school, it's the swimming I'm going to avoid because these Olympics are going to be my last. She's like, what are you talking about? You're one of the best swimmers of the century. You have probably like a decade ahead of you. And he's like, of what? She says, well, becoming faster, winning more. And what about the glory? He's like, well, what about it? He's like, this is not the kind of love from people that I'm interested in, Scarlett. I've been telling this to Penn for years. She just thinks that I'll miss the attention and pull a Tom Brady. It's a great dream, but it's not mine anymore. I want to go to med school. I want to travel. I want to see my family. And I want to have morally bankrupt amounts of sex with someone I'm in love with. Kinky, vanilla, I want it all. I want to adopt rescue animals with her. I want to take care of her and watch her be cold in Sweden and marvel every day at how much smarter than me she is. And Scarlett, and she starts to cry. And he says, why are you crying? I don't know. Are you sure? And he just hugs her because he realizes she still cannot have this conversation, or at least that's what's implied. He realizes that she still has him in her phone as Lucas Penelope. He changes his name in her phone to Lucas Scarlet, which is so fucking cute. They go to his house and there's a surprise party for him, which nobody warned her about, I guess. Penelope says she wants to talk to Lucas alone. And I'm like, oh, great. So we're going to do this. And I was really disappointed. And Scarlett decides, you know what? I'm actually just going to go home. But she doesn't tell Lucas that. Like, she is supposed to stay and she just ends up bailing. About an hour after she gets home and has showered, Lucas is just at her doorway. And this should have been like the moment where she's like, okay, I can say this out loud. She cannot say it out loud. She's like, there's no reason for him to be here. And they just fall asleep. That's it. She's still in therapy, even though she's over her block. But going to the therapist still helps her to put everything in perspective, which is great. That is true. Going to therapy helps you put things in perspective. She says to her therapist, I'm excited about this season. I'm not going to let my failures define me. I'm ready to be as strong as I can be. In talking to Penelope, she finds out that Theo, the teacher's assistant, broke up with her because he felt like she might be too young for him. I was at his place every weekend. We did so many things. I wanted to tell Lucas because he's still my oldest friend. He patted my back and told me I'll find someone new soon. He was nice but distant. And Scarlett was like, he's not distant. Have you ever considered that, is it possible maybe that you two just bonded over your respective trauma and then entered into a romantic relationship on the wave of that? And Penelope's like, are you saying Lucas didn't love me? She said, no, he did, and he still cares about you. I just wonder if he didn't love you the way that you wanted to be loved. Except she can't say that part out loud. If he didn't love you the way you wanted to be loved, if that was painful, you decided to tell yourself that Lucas simply isn't capable of deep romantic feelings. If maybe you know only certain parts of him and you completely ignored the rest, if you still see him as the 15-year-old boy who needed you when his mom died and never realized that he's grown into a different person, if what's between you two was more about mutual protection. And all she can say out loud is, maybe the transition to romantic love was a little rocky for the two of you. And Penelope's like, well, I know Lucas well enough to know that that's not the case. I know what we had, but in any case, I think that bonding over trauma is still a nice way to fall in love and build a future, more valid than sharing the same sexual fetishes. And Scarlett's like, excuse me? And Penelope's like, I didn't mean it as a jab. There's lots of ways to fall in love. I just am wondering if I made a mistake, that's all. And Scarlett's like, a mistake? And Penelope says, yeah, by breaking up with Lucas. I mean, he and I have been through so much and he gets me. And it's not like you two are dating, right? It's just mostly. And Scarlett says, yeah, we aren't officially dating. So in therapy, she talks about her feelings with Sam. Does being in love with Lucas make you unhappy? She says, no, it makes me feel guilty. I appreciate that we're talking about this in therapy. I think that this is a really smart way to go about this. Instead of like calling her stepmom, I think that utilizing the therapist for this to work this out makes total sense. And Penn is the closest thing to a best friend I've had ever. And Sam's like, she hurt you though. She didn't mean to. She was just careless because she's hurting too. Is she the reason you've been avoiding Lucas? Lucas has been texting her saying, come over just to spend the night. I sleep better when you're around. Scarlett's like, why? And Lucas says, because I know you're safe and you smell good and you're soft. And Sam says, well, her relationship with Lucas is unlikely to productively resume. Your relationship with Lucas is different. The possibility of getting back with Lucas is an illusion she clings to. I can't shatter it by spending time with him under her nose. Lucas shows up to wherever she is. She's not at therapy anymore. She's been saying like, oh, I have schoolwork. I'm having all these excuses for why she won't come around. And he's like, what is going on? You're not good at this, at playing game. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to come up with an excuse. It's just me. And I'm like, oh my God, tell him. She says, Penn is not doing well. He's like, right, yeah, Penn and her f***ing delusions. Did she ask you to take a step back? No. All on your own then. She's my friend. I don't think she could handle that you and I? Come on, Scarlett, what are you and I doing? Are you finally ready to say it? Oh my God, say it. Say it out loud. Do it. Until she feels better, maybe we should pull back or focus on the more physical part of our relationship. He's like, oh, now? Do you want me to you while pretending that you're not the person I feel closest to in the world now or another day? And I'm like, bitch. Am I allowed to kiss you? Would that be unfair toward Penn? She's like, of course you can kiss me. Then he makes her lick his palm over and over to get it, slippery. And then they're doing spicy stuff. I'm at his disposal. Any disgusting thing he's ever thought of, he could do with my blessing. But he doesn't take advantage. It's detached like this, like I'm a canvas. Nothing more than a picture he found on the internet. Some faceless, nameless girl he doesn't care about and never will. You know what I like about fucking you? You'd let me do anything, wouldn't you? You trust me that much. You're just that perfect. It's Lucas who's perfect, who knows to push my boundaries, but never cross them. To make me hurt just enough to feel good. Maybe we're perfect for each other. More valid than sharing the same sexual. She's thinking about what Penn said to her. That really messed her up. What do you say if you want me to stop? He puts a finger in her peach. During, he says, I want to take a picture of this. And she's like, he really could actually hurt me right now. Split me and make me bleed. The thought is as much a turn on as knowing that he'd rather slash his own arm off than harm me. That's where it lives. My love for him in the space between the things he could do and what he chooses instead. Oh my God, my heart. During peach stuff, I can't believe this isn't giving me the ick. He says she was made to be by him. He says, is it too much? She nods, and then he says that she's a liar because she didn't use the safe word, which is stop. Nothing else makes it stop except the safe word. It's okay if you want to cry. It hurts, doesn't it? It all hurts so much. And now what we're talking about is not so much the physical stuff, it's the emotional stuff. What really hurts is pushing him away, she thinks. I'm going to pick you up, fuck you into 1,000 little pieces, and then put them back together. You don't need me to do it, but that's what you want, isn't it? For me to fix you. I feel like I'm just not understanding this because this isn't like my thing. I could make you wait for it. I could force you to tell me all the things you cannot say, but I won't because I know all of them already. And then it says there's a wet explosion in her brain, which is like the absolute worst way to describe an. And then he keeps going despite the fact that she just finished. He says that she's ruining him. And I'm like, I don't understand that either. I don't get this. He wipes her tears, tucks her into bed, asks her, what are you scared of, Scarlett? And she says, everything. When it comes to what matters, you're fearless. Try to remember that. I just think that this is like a really nice guy. And I just really appreciate him. So you can understand why I'm like, all right, 4 stars. What do you want me to do? 4 stars and no miscommunication trope is a huge chunk of why. Her and Penelope get henna tattoos that are supposed to say diving besties, but the guy wrote them wrong. So it says diving beasties, which was actually funny. And they both qualify for NCAA, whatever that is. Again, I don't know anything about this stuff.
Your plaques. Bingo time! Sturm scams! I'm just saying words that start with S.
He's starting to unravel because he desperately needs her to admit her feelings for him, which is like, oh my God, I love when men pine. Oh, I love it so much. I love a hand flex. I love a, if you don't tell me that you love me back, I'm going to wither into a husk. I love when men pine. He's talking to her and he says, I can't fucking do this. This is so much more than it was the first time, and it sure as hell is now. I need you to admit it. I need you not to leave me alone to face this. It's fine. And she starts to talk and it's enough. Like she doesn't even finish the sentence. She says, from the very start, and he's like, good enough. And then they have vanilla schmecks. So freaking cute. I want to do this every day with you for the rest of my life. He says, let me say it. I want to say it just once. Please, Scarlett, let me tell you. And she says, please don't. He says, I don't know if I can keep it in. And he says it in Swedish. He says that he loves her in Swedish, which she doesn't know Swedish, so she just assumes. She's like, all right, I need to sort out things before I can move any further with this. I'm gonna have to sort out Penn. And of course, Penn calls crying. She's like, I didn't do it. They're saying that I did steroids.
For example, steroids?
I don't even know what came of this. Like, I don't even know what Pans. I just hate them. I think I might have actually given this 5 stars if it were not for Penelope and her use. So he's like, all right, well, if you didn't take steroids, ask for a retest.
You weren't tested positive for anabolic steroids. What?
And she's like, okay, well, drop Scarlett off and I need your help. And of course, like once again, Penelope is pulling Lucas away from Scarlett. She ends up getting a concussion. And when they speak again, he's like really frustrated. He's like, this isn't about Penn. You have a concussion and you didn't tell me. You need to tell me these things. And Pen is behind them and she's like, what are you guys talking about? And she's starting to get like, it's obvious that she's getting agitated about them and the amount of attention that Lucas pays Scarlett. Hooray, Scarlett wins the NCAA in the next chapter. And she thinks about the person she was 2 years ago, how alone she felt, scared of being too much, of not being enough, of being imperfect. And now she like feels so free of that. Unfortunately, Victoria, the one who got injured that she replaced, sees her and Lucas like, you know, acting coupley. And she's like, are you serious? Bree's there, the other diver, I guess, and also Pen. And Pen looks at Scarlett and says, did you just want to be me all along? Because it feels that way, Vandy. Are you in your single white female era? And I'm like, that's so goofy, stop. Lucas is like, what the hell, Penelope? These are Scarlett's teammates too. Pen and I are not even together. I went along with what you asked and kept our breakup a secret because Scarlett knew and she was the only one who mattered. This is where it ends though. And Penelope's like, do you realize how painful this is? You were just hooking up. Lucas says, Pen, when you broke up with me, I was clear that I considered my commitment to you over. You knew from the start that I was going to treat my relationship with Scarlett in a way that was not just like something I was doing to pass the time. And so they're all like, oh, so you're in love with two people now? And he says, no, I'm not. And so obviously, like, he's in love with Scarlett. And Pen says, you took everything from me. Thanks, Vandy. I forbid you to fall in love with her. And he's like, Pen, I already have. She says, well, Scarlett looks shocked by that piece of news. And I don't like that Scarlett looks shocked by that piece of news because you know he said it in Swedish, bitch. You were my boyfriend and my best friend. Pen, you are being so unfair, says Scarlett. Lucas and Scarlett talk and he's like, she is not in love. This is possessiveness. We are just toys to her. And I'm like, if you knew this about her, then why didn't you say anything sooner? Why were you constantly at her beck and call? Again, I really don't like the way that Penelope was used. And so he's pouring his heart out to her and he's like, I have been in love with you. I've been trying to tell you for months. And she says, stop. He's like, I'm so fucking happy about it. And she's like, stop. You said that if I said stop, that it stops. I'm asking you to stop now. This is too much. That's my best friend. And he says, I need you to know that from the very start, you had all the power. From the very start, I was in the palm of your hand. And she says, yes, I understand. And I was like, oh my God, that makes me sad for him. I was so sad. Justice for Lucas. She goes home and she talks to her stepmom, Barb, and her stepmom says, do you think that she says to her stepmom, do you think that a relationship that started so messy with so many hiccups and hurting other people can have a happy future? And I'm like, hurting other people is just Penelope and she's being a total bitch. Who cares? She is not the love of your life. She is literally just a bitch. Hit her with your car. But Vandy's just a nicer friend than I am, I guess. And then it says that Barb is the single most influential figure throughout her life, the person who rescued me from an abusive situation when it would have been much easier to simply rescue herself. And I'm like, this is the most influential person in your life? She rarely comes up. I feel like we could have spent more time fusing Barb into the book and less time with Scarlett being like, do you think that Pen, who told us to have schmecks, is upset that we're having schmecks? She writes Penelope a letter, but that she doesn't send. And she's like, you know what? I think I love Lucas and I'm going to fly to go see him. And she's like, Barb, can I have money so that I can fly to Sweden? And Barb's like, absolutely, because Barb's a doctor. But before she leaves, Penelope shows up. You don't owe me anything, Penelope says. Scarlett's like, I just don't know what I did to deserve being treated that way. Penelope says, nothing. You went to Amsterdam and Carissa was there and she took pictures of you and Luke together and sent them to me. She's like, I realize now that I'm willing to admit that being Lucas's girlfriend felt like a middle finger to all of the bullies who'd tormented me in high school. So I guess Carissa was the villain in the situation? I don't know. Like, either way, it doesn't really feel like it matters because Penelope was just like a character there to like make drama conveniently. It feels very contrived. But I never even cared about Lucas's dreams and we'd been codependent friends. I acted like Luke was a sandwich stolen by a seagull. I was the fucking villain. And Scarlett says, I don't think that it was anything as simple as that. They were just choices that were made and there are consequences. I do like that we had this conversation and didn't just leave it like Pen bad, moving on. But I also still just don't like the way that we used Pen as a character. She flies to Sweden and he knows that she's coming before she shows up. And she's like, how did you know that I was coming? Did Pen tell you? And he says, oh, you never stopped sharing your location with me. I can't sleep unless I know where you are. Stop, that's so cute. This is so messy. falling in love, I nod. And I did it so deeply, desperately fast. It's just pure violence. And he says, the ultimate loss of control, huh? You've given up control. You've trusted me to take over. And she says, and you never took advantage. And they're like, all right, we're going to have to make some plans for the future. It's going to require discussions. We're going to have to make plans. Maybe another listy list. Scarlett, this is it for me. I'm in. We've been dating for nearly a year in everything but name. We work together in every possible way, except the chaos you live in, but I can probably train that out of you. Punishment's positive reinforcement. I need this man to come over here and nicely bully me into organizing my house, actually. Lucas, are you available? Call me. He tells her, I lied to you by omission when I didn't tell you how early I fell for you. I don't think I'll ever be able to live apart. My God, he's so Pride and Prejudice coded with just like specifically the lines at the end. He's so hand flexed. I wouldn't be able to be with other people or handle open relationships or take breaks. I know you think that I'm not capable of jealousy. Boy, you literally got so mad over some dude talking about her. Maybe I thought that too, but if you were asking me for any of those things, it would gut me, Scarlett. It would absolutely end me. And if it were non-negotiable, if it were to be a condition with you, I'm still not sure I would be able to say no. I love you so, so much, she says. A few years later in the epilogue, they are both doctors. They don't see each other very often except like in passing at home, where they like write notes to each other about whether or not their cat is, trying to manipulate them into getting treats, which Carlos and I need to enact. She already had treats today, didn't she, Artemis? And they're texting each other, and she's like, how many times are we gonna see each other this year? And he says, well, at least one. She's like, right, the wedding, which I assume means their wedding. And they find out that they finally have a day off at the same time and they get to be together. And he's like, all right, we're gonna sleep in, we're gonna go at it like animals. Quick break at the pool, come back home, more animal stuff. She's like, what are we, a couple? And that's it. That was absolutely fucking adorable. I really hated the stuff with Penn, and I didn't like, the jokes were pretty cringe. A lot of the jokes were pretty cringe. There was a couple in there that were kind of funny, but oh man, that Penelope stuff was really frustrating to read because we were being set up all along with like the incorrect information and like the characters not doing things that made sense. These are people that are having like very particular conversations, having to be open and trust each other, and yet they're not having a conversation about the elephant in the room, which is Penelope says that they're going to be together at some point. And it just doesn't make sense that that Scarlett wouldn't be like, I'm uncomfortable continuing on with this like schmexual relationship until I have it like have the understanding, like we've all talked about it, where I know for certain that we're not doing anything wrong. Like it wouldn't have taken much. That's her best friend and the guy she wants to have schmex with, and her best friend is the one that encouraged this relationship. So why did we avoid that conversation? That would have prevented all the drama, but that's the point, is that would have prevented all the drama, and then we wouldn't have had that explosion at the end. The wet explosion in her brain. Just kidding. Anyways, that was Deep End. Out of all the Ali Hazelwood books I've read, which I've read, is this the fifth? That one novella, that other novella, Bride, Check and Mate, and yeah, this is the fifth Ali Hazelwood I've read in the last year, and this is my favorite. For sure. Solid 4 stars, really liked it. And I like the use of therapy in this. I think that was really good. So solid 4, I would say if you like, books with therapy in it, romances, and a little bit of rhymes with sync, this ain't bad. All right, thanks so much for watching. If you made it to the end of this, you can leave the water drops, the splish splash emoji, or a swimmer, whatever you want. Anything pool related goes. Let me know if you read this and if you liked it or if you didn't like it. I know my friend Morgan absolutely hated this one, which fair. I'm surprised that the Penelope stuff didn't like ruin my entire enjoyment of it, but I really liked Lucas so much that it was fine. Like it did lower it a whole star, but it was fine nonetheless. But stop making 50 Shades jokes. No more. All right. Thanks so much for watching. Comments, questions go down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
I'm undercover. Not under much.
And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Andy Mation, Ashley H, Astra, Barry B, Call Me Kodiak, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Eric D, Jade L, John E, K, Kaleno K, Katie Ann, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lemon Jelly. Y'all put food in your name, and I'm always doing this at lunchtime and I always get hungry. Lex, Other Lex, Lily, Mataraptor, Megwin Rose, Melissa, Minby, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, SJ, Scarlett, Samar, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, 3 raccoons in a trench coat, Tori, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I also have to say a big thank you to my Potato Search Marxist patrons, and those are Adrian, Aaron, Alejandra, Alicia's Last Frayed Nerve, Althea, Amanda D, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Bari the Witch, Beck, Blythe Lavender, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Bree, Bridget G. Collins, Kate B, Caitlin, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate, Kathy, Celeste, Claire Online, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Courtney, Darius, Danielle, Danita, Darren, Desiree Michelle, DILF Enthusiast, Silco Apologist Era. Good shit. Dorian, Dorothea supports public education. Hell yeah. Draco-chan, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Aaron with 2 E's, Aaron Starlight, Fiona, Gadarn, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Helen, Harising, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Kai Brecker has not read 6 of Crows, Caitlin, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, KMTV, Kayana, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Macy Jane, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Mary, Megan, Malara, May, Morgan, Myth Lesbian, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Paige P, Paul, Penelope, Penny Shilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rhea, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakyalume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Sophie, Stardust, T Delegati, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, That One Cute Chick, This Is Not a Trap, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today. Oh my gosh, I forget how unhinged it gets at the end. Triple M, Tito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Waves, Wobbs, Writer A, and last but not least, Zayden's award-winning Eggplant. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.